Welcome to the Peace is Possible podcast, where healing meets truth and inner work becomes world work. I'm your host, Eva Dalak, life coach, international gender and conflict expert, and founder of Peace Activation. In this space, we dive deep into what it really means to live and lead with peace, beyond slogans, beyond performance. Each episode offers raw conversations, personal reflections, and practical tools to help you cultivate inner peace and create safer, more conscious space around you. If you believe peace is possible, not just globally, but right here in your body, in your relationships, you're in the right place. Subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast and visit peaceactivation.org to learn more. Welcome, Nirit. Welcome to the Peace is Possible podcast. I'm so excited to interview you today. How are you?
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
How am I? I'm quite excited because, I'm organizing a conference
I
on
know.
women and their power and their ability to bring peace. And it's been a lot of work. It's been very interesting and very inspiring. And I'm looking forward to it happening.
So let's start with, who are you, Nirit? Maybe introduce yourself first to our listeners.
I was born in Haifa, a multicultural city, and I became a peace activist when I was 15, and I am a peace activist since then. I still believe peace is possible, even though times are really bad and quite desperate for so many of us people in the Middle East, and yet that's the only answer and solution to our problem: peace and
Peace.
freedom and an end to occupation, and everyone given a chance to live their life really happily, successfully, and not be abused or oppressed by others.
And you've been doing that since the age of 15.
Yes, and I'm
Right.
73, and I haven't lost hope.
And you didn't
How
lose hope.
unbelievable.
I know, and that's what is so interesting. And because so many people feel hopeless, helpless, powerless. And I saw you lately in Paris, you're organizing this conference on peace, also on gathering women around this issue of women, peace, and security. And I'm so inspired by your faith, because I feel like people think I'm crazy. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm just like 50. There are people that started even earlier. And you still have hope, and that's impressive, because it's not
I have a deep
easy.
understanding
Yes.
that it's the only way we can not continue killing one another, hating one another, oppressing one another, surviving, living in a survival mode, not taking care of our trauma or post-trauma, and having that affect our lives and it becomes worse and worse through the years. The post-trauma becomes worse, and the reaction to the post-trauma becomes more violent, and something has to stop. And I think we've reached a point where some people are waking up and understanding that there's no use to continuing this way. Not enough people are doing that, but it needs a lot of work. We need to understand that what makes us react is our fears on all sides, and different sides choose different strategies, and as we can see, the strategies that are chosen are not working. And we have peace with Egypt. It's not a very happy peace, but it's been there for 40 years or maybe more, and it's a beginning. It's a good beginning, and it's a proof that you can make peace with the worst enemy, or what you then consider the worst enemy, and that's the only choice. The only choice, and we have to understand that we really have to reach into ourselves and do the work and understand that we have to jump over the fear, be brave, and get to know one another, get to realize that we are all human beings with faults and really amazing abilities, and that we can connect and we can do it. We can really bring peace about. And I know it sounds naive, but I'm a great believer in naivete, by the way. I think dreaming and believing and hoping and staying a little bit naive are the materials that create the ability to bring peace. That's how I feel about it.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you're part of the organizing committee for this conference. Do you want to tell us a bit more about what is the conference and what's the thinking behind this?
The thinking behind it is that we are 51% of the world population, and whenever there is a war in the Middle East, in Israel or in Palestine, women are not heard. They are not part of the decision-making makers, and they are not being taken into consideration, and they pay a really high price in war, and it's not something that men seem to care about. And we have a deep understanding that there is a problem, because even though there is a resolution 1325, and even though women have, moved along, have now shown that they have ability, somehow they are not decision makers, and somehow they don't get to become decision makers. And we want to understand if it's what we have to change in ourselves in order to make the change, and how can we affect the men who have the power and don't really want to share it with women. What can we do to change that? And that's really what the conference is about. And one of the things they say about women is that women don't like conflicts. Now, this is really generalizing. Women don't like conflicts, and men thrive on conflicts. They love having a good argument and winning, and women seem to want to have harmony, and for that they are prepared to pay a price. Not all of them. I have now, because of the conference, met young, very empowered women, very determined women who have overcome what my generation grew up to believe in or to do. And so it's going to be really interesting, because there are going to be really interesting women who will take place in this conference. And we have Palestinian women. Some of them will be talking on Zoom, because sadly enough, they cannot enter Israel these days. And some of them who are from East Jerusalem will enter and join us physically in the conference. And we will have guests from overseas on Zoom, and it's going to be really very special. I hope.
What's the title? We've been talking about what's the title of this conference?
Yes, we can. Women can do it.
Women can do it.
Women can create, change, and make peace.
Mm-hmm. And it's taking place in Israel, in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem. Yes.
On the 9/11.
On the 11th of September, yeah. 9/11 is the American way of saying 11th of September.
I know, but it's such an interesting time to do a conference on women can make it. I think anything related, there's something that happened geopolitically with this key date. It's kind of 9/11, just like October 7th, and there's lots of parallel that have been taken between these two dates around the trauma, because it activated trauma. Like you refer to post-trauma. I think we're like in active trauma, actually, everywhere around the world, especially in Palestine and Israel, but also a lot of the international action that were justified after 9/11, so that there has been a program, and it feels like this is the same. It's like in the same trend with October 7th. So it is an interesting date to choose because if women could make it, would they have
Yes.
done it also would there have been a different type of, I would say, international reaction since 9/11?
I can't say. I believe the reaction would always be different if women were part of the decision makers. On the one hand, on the other hand, I think 9/11 was so traumatic and so dramatic and so unexpected that one of the worst problems with reacting to events is that people don't take a breath and they don't sort of they react immediately, and their reaction is emotional, and some of it is very vendetta,
Revenge. It's based on
revengeful, and not very rational. The same happened on the 7th of October, the 8th of October. The reaction was so crazy and so out of contact, because really, if people in this country were sane, they would say, let's first of all get the hostages back. Take whatever you want for our hostages, and we will decide how to react later. But it's not possible in this country. The leadership of this country is so reactionary, or whatever. I don't know how you say that in English. The reaction is so devastating and so crazy and so out of proportion. And so what we have done in Gaza will never be forgiven or forgotten. And it's the most shameful thing that Israel as a country, as a government has ever done. It will never, it's going to be the worst part of our history. Hopefully the worst, and hopefully it won't get worse, which really saddens me, being an Israeli, having to bear the responsibility of what has happened to so many thousands of Palestinians in Gaza, the death of children and mothers and people, and the destruction of Gaza it's unbelievable. Really, it's hard to believe that anybody would do that as an act of war. For me, it's the worst. I cannot imagine anything. And I'm in contact with women from Gaza who are begging for their lives and really want to find a way to get out of Gaza and beg for help. And that's where I really feel totally hopeless, helpless, and it drives me crazy because I'm so afraid that something will happen to them while we are looking for a way to get them out of there. So that's really the worst part of it, knowing that every day people die for nothing on both sides, of course. And you remember we had this discussion and I told you that I've found out that I am now searching and trying to understand if my connection to the Palestinians is like, in a way, the Stockholm syndrome.
And that's what really ignited my desire to interview you, because I think it reflects a lot of the peace camp in Israel.
Yeah, I think so too.
I would love for you to share more about that.
I think that just as the right-wing Israelis have their strategy, their very violent strategy, and which I, of course, cannot connect to and cannot understand, and really I don't understand it. I don't understand I don't understand why people think revenge is an answer to anything, or jealousy in that sense. I also find it I understand it's a human virtue, but I cannot connect to but either. On the other hand, I can really connect to the deep understanding that in some way, some of us left-wing peace seekers want to get friendly with our enemy. And it's not do all the work, just be. I used to make a joke about an aunt of mine who studied Arabic, and she was a right-wing woman. And when she told me she was studying Arabic, I said, you want to learn the language of the enemy. Because I couldn't understand why she, of all people, would be interested in studying Arabic. And yeah, so I really believe that there is that's one way of dealing with the fear. It's becoming friendly with the people who are considered your enemy and getting to know them, and is a way is part of the work, but it's not all the work, because we need to go deeper and understand that exactly, that it's not going to work until we really embrace the differences, the difference in culture, the difference in language, the difference in music, the difference in the people, and accept them the way they are, and hope that they will accept us the way we are, and appreciate the difference and the migvan.
The variety.
Yeah, and enjoy it and celebrate it, and also take responsibility for what has happened, and do a lot of work of reconciliation after we have peace.
I actually say during and before we have peace, while we're negotiating for peace, and after we have peace, because I think that it's not linear. It's very non-linear, and you speak my language. For me, peace activation is based on that. It's taking responsibility for what's happening inside if I want to change what's happening outside. And it's interesting because you shared with me last week, I think, this realization that you just had. And a couple of days ago, here in Costa Rica, I was having a coffee with the mother of a child that is studying with my son, call her an Israeli friend, but I don't know her for a long time, so I don't yet consider her as a friend. But she was like, I don't understand when like people come to your gathering and say that they're Palestinian. Like I came to one of your gathering and I had to step out because there were Palestinian there. Isn't Palestine Israel? Like, is that what they're referring to? And just the level, and when you say, and then she was saying, when you say you're Palestinian, so you're negating me as Israeli, no? And I think that level of understanding, or I would say misunderstanding, and the fear behind the words, that me defining myself as Palestinian, or somebody referring to Palestine, or referring to the fact that we don't want to be under occupation, is perceived by some Israeli as a threat to their own existence. And that's what is, I feel, cornering us to not have peace. It's this misunderstanding and this belief that if you acknowledge me as a Palestinian, you just denied you as a Jewish Israeli.
Which is amazing.
It's amazing. It's like, why
it's
would
really
that?
like, wow.
How
You know
did we
that only 3% of Israeli Jews have contact with Palestinian Israelis. They don't have, they know them. The most they know them from is from restaurants,
as
garages,
waiters, or yeah.
or buying meat.
Yeah,
That's the connection they have with
yeah,
them, which
yeah.
is amazing. And that includes some of my best friends who are left-wing Israelis. They have never met a woman or a man for a cup of coffee, and they never discussed or had a relationship, which is like really unbelievable, especially for me, because I grew up in a multicultural city like Haifa. I grew up with Palestinians, the Israelis, with Druze from Daliat el Carmel and Usfia. My father had a business partner who was from Kfar Manda. And so I grew in a home that no one ever told me they were Arabs or Druze. They were people. They were my parents' friends. And then I lived in Jaffa for so many years. And my young son went to the Peace, it was called Gana Shalom, the Peace Kindergarten.
The peace kingdom.
And yeah, it was.
But I think that's the beauty of meeting and living with the other, because I grew up in a multicultural house as well. My father worked at the municipality of Tel Aviv Jaffa. My mom worked as a seamstress for a Jewish company. And so I think, and I grew up in Jaffa, and I was in a French Jesuit school. So I think like meeting the variety of people and understanding, putting them outside of the box of your Jewish, Palestinian, Israeli, Muslim, Christian, Druze, Bedouin. Like I often say that the state of Israel was based on dividing so that it can rule. It divided all the people so that they put them one against the other, and hating and the fear of the other. So the fear of the other is at core foundation of our existence. And so in that context, when I hear like some Israeli friends say, like October 7 and what happened, and it's like when we should be justifying what's happening right now in the sense of like what we need to fight is the Muslim Brotherhood or Islam, what's happening with the Islam state, like Islamic State, or Iran is the threat, or the religion is the threat. I'm not seeing how much in Israel we've been programmed. And
Absolutely.
I say we because I was in an Israeli system. And we had this whole communication over WhatsApp. And he's like, but you don't understand. It's like the Palestinians are being trained and educated to hate Israeli Jews. And I'm like, yeah, you as well. It's not any different. It's just like the only difference is that nobody's talking about how Israel is programming you. And to understand that at the age of 18, instead of like going to university, you go to the army. And that's like your next level programming to hate the other. And nobody speak about that. And at the same time, you have like lots of international programs, international development assistance to assist the Palestinian education system so that they don't hate, or they review their school books and school programs so that they don't attack and hate and program the Jewish person. And I'm like, it's so interesting how it's so one-sided. It's so there's such a level of misunderstanding and blindness of not wanting to see how things are actually.
Yes, and not only that, most Israelis will say that Palestinian women are recruited
Yeah.
to the war, and they are proud to have a son who is a shaheed. And they are totally unaware of the fact that they are also recruited, and they grew up believing that it's good to die for your country. It was a slogan in Israel, Tov lamut be'ad artzi. They say that Trumpeldor invented it. Some people would argue that. And women are so recruited. I was shocked to discover how they still are so recruited, and they are prepared to pay the price. And on the other hand, there are so many movements who are really against it now, which is really inspiring and really giving me hope, because there is a tahalich.
It's a process.
There's a process. It's happening. Women are getting, there is the Mother's Call, which was written by Palestinian and Israeli women, Women Wage Peace and Women of the Sun. And it says in it, we call the people, the leaders, to sit down and make peace, and we bring children to the world so that they will grow and live a good life, and not so that they will die. And slowly there is such a movement. It's happening. Women and men are not prepared to pay that price anymore, which is really
I think that's the hope. That's really the hope, and it gives the hope that peace is possible because people are awakening. The only thing I would add also, I worked in so many different conflict zones where women were also the main bearer of violence. And so for me, the assumption that if we put more women in decision-making places, there will be peace is an assumption that is not verified. And so especially that when we see right now in the current government and some of the women that are so extremist. So for me, I would be like more towards what constitutes this type of feminine leadership that takes the values of the feminine and that is based not on gender, but it's based on quality, masculine versus feminine. And how do we make sure that these qualities that exist in every single person can be nurtured and promoted and valued so that we can change this society, so that we can change the society inside out. And inside out, it doesn't refer only to the society, it also refers to the inside of me as a woman, the inside of me as a man, so that I can come and show up in a different way than what society had trained me or programmed me up until now. And I think that's where our choice lays, of choosing the action that would make sense to me towards making peace is possible, towards making peace as a possibility that exists. Maybe it's not apparent, but it exists. This possibility exists.
Yes, also we have to consider that we all grew in patriarchalic families and
Yeah.
culture, and so the effect on women is just as much as effective as it is on men. And yet, I do believe that somehow women, maybe because they bring up children, maybe because they are more sensitive or more aware to their feelings, they are allowed to feel more than men are allowed to feel. You know, men in Israel, children in Israel are not allowed to cry. Boys, they have to man up, become soldiers. So no, you can't. Why you can't cry? Boys don't have the same space or allowance to cry. You know, to show their pain, to show their fear, to show their discomfort. They have less of an ability to do that than young girls do. So that really also is very effective. Also, because mostly men fight in the army, the trauma that they bear inside their bodies and what they have seen and had to witness and had to do as young people, you know, soldiers are 18 when they go to the army. That affects their life. It affects their ability to love. It affects their ability to connect. It affects their whole being. Until this war, it wasn't something that was spoken, and that also has been more spoken of lately in this war, which is also a little more, a little better than it used to be. Who knows? Maybe out of this unbelievable period in our life, something good will happen because people will say it's enough. We cannot continue this path.
I think, as horrific as it may sound, something good will come out of it. And I think the good is the awakening of humanity. Because this has been going on for 77 years, if not more, at least in the chapter of Palestine, Israel, you know. But what's happening right now, and the fact that I say that many countries and many people are riding the wave of Gaza, in the sense of, like, it's not necessarily what's happening in Gaza, it's awakening. What's happening in Gaza has awakened people to see how manipulated we all are. So what's happening there and what's happening in Israel is not limited to Israel and Gaza and Palestine. It's actually a reflection of how we've been programmed and manipulated into this matrix and have been buying into all these different programs and kind of functioning like soldiers, all of us, whether we have, you know, whether we have the appearance of a soldier or not. And I think that's the awakening of humanity, to understand that we are one humanity. And I love what you said at the beginning. It's this diversity that is beautiful to witness. It's just the fact that we're so different colors and different perspective and different teachings. This is what constitutes our richness. And that's where we can really thrive on our diversity, rather than survive to prove the other wrong so that I can exist.
Yes, but if you look at Europe and what happened with the immigration to Europe, you discover that the Europeans didn't have an idea of how to accept the people who came there. They didn't look after them. They didn't accept who they were. They wanted them to become French or Swedish or whatever. They disrespect their culture. They disrespect their language. They disrespect their beings. And they actually, if you think about it, most probably, sadly enough, unless they're intellectuals, they want to abuse them. They want to use them for cheap labor. And so they wake up to what is happening in Europe and they don't understand why it happened. And it's so obvious. What has happened is so obvious and so sad, because history repeats itself over and over again. This is how people behave to immigrants. Which is really, really sad. Instead of becoming a multicultural world that really enjoys the differences in culture, in architecture, in music, in philosophy, Europeans think they are the middle of the world and they've invented it all, and they have no, it's like it comes out of a lot of ignorance. Fear is part of ignorance.
Absolutely. I think a friend of mine said that there's four elements, I think, that corner us into hating each other. One is fear, absolutely. Fear, isolation, victimhood, this victim consciousness, thinking that we are the victim and we have someone perpetuating violence against us. And I think this ignorance and victimhood and isolation are pushing us to hating the other and justify violence that we take on the other, justifying our own violence because he started or they did it. They hate us, so we have to do this to protect ourselves. And hence the security argument that kind of shut up any argument against what's happening right now. This has been like really, I feel like there has been an awakening of humanity and awakening towards what is trauma, but there has been also a weaponizing of this trauma to justify further traumatizing. So I think that we're not just like in post-traumatic situation, we're like in active trauma every single day for the past 2 years. You know? And it's reflected differently in every place. And so we feel like there's the first-hand trauma, but there's also second-hand and third-hand. And how we are, because it's stream-live, this genocide is stream-live, the trauma is kind of like also just spreading. But if we think about it, is really another program that is put there to justify violence. And so for me, it's like taking the fuel out of this trauma is acknowledging our humanity, our shared humanity. And how can we work together as one front towards the liberation of all of us? Like, no occupation, no violence, no genocide can justify the security of anybody. And as you say, there is a lot of awakening within the Israeli society, even though many still are blind to what's happening. Many justify what's happening, which is unbelievable when you think about it. And at the same time, when you observe it from the outside and you see, how is that possible that a human being would be thinking this way and would justify something like that? But then you think about, like, as an abused person become an abuser, and the only way to remove the origin of abuse is treatment, is acknowledgement,
absolutely,
is processing. And this is something that neither the Society of Israel had, or even the society in Germany had. We're talking about Palestine, Israel as two separate sides of a conflict, removing completely the colonial history that you just brought back into the center, which is Europe, the colonial Europe, and how they have treated their own immigrant, their own colonized people. Where did Europe or even the US, how did they come to be? Because of stealing all the richness of the continent of Africa. You know, there's this book, Afrique au secours de l'Occident, so Africa coming to save the West. And I think we are now in an era where we need to acknowledge all the history, his story of colonialism and how we justified colonialism and the programs that we've put, and how international development assistance have been also another program of colonialism. And to justify a lot of what's happening right now, it's just like the backlash. And we're talking about like a certain period after World War II, but we need to go even back, even long before. And so putting all this in perspective in human evolution and understanding the disconnection has happened originally because we disconnected from the mother. And we disconnected from the mother nature, not just the mother, the woman.
Absolutely.
But actually, the way we have disconnected ourselves from our own nature and from nature have brought into a lot of justification to the violence and the way we live our life now, disconnected and in such a dissonance.
You know, since the war between Ukraine and Russia started, after 80 years of peace, the Europeans also became very affected and became their post-trauma started working for them. The Germans became petrified. The Finns became petrified that Russia would also start a war against them. And suddenly Europe became aware of their post-trauma again and became so for a few years they weren't really interested in what was happening in Israel and Palestine because they were so affected by that. And you know, I always say that since 1945, 800 million human beings died in wars, massacres, genocides around the world. The problem is they weren't white, so the world didn't really care. And that is something that the whites of the world have to also work on, realizing that when bad things happen, we have to take care of them and not avoid them, not notice them. And also the big problem, one of the worst problems of the world, is how much money is made by weapons. Weapons,
Yes.
and
One of my first I think the first podcast was like, what if peace was as profitable as war?
yeah, how can we turn peace into to profitable as war? It's
What do you
really,
think?
if you
How
just
can
imagine the amount of money that has been spent in the last 2 years, this place, Palestine and Israel, could flourish if we use the money for the good and not for the worst. But it seems to not interest anybody around the world. There isn't a movement like that I know of. Maybe there is and I'm not aware of, but
can also create one?
yeah. Peace can be
I
very
always say peace can be a business. I mean, peace building has been a business. Like if we
yes, in a
are
sense, but a
honest,
very small business in comparison
it's
to
been
weapons.
absolutely no, but I also mean it also in a critical way. Peace building
Mm,
and like the way Oslo has been manipulated for peace building business and not working on the core trauma, on what's happening, on dealing with what is like the denial and dissociation is part of the trauma. The denial that
mhm,
happened after World War II was like creating all this international institution that will guarantee that never again there will be a genocide, that never again we will protect human rights, we will protect all this system, international system, all this big declaration around women's right, around human right, around children's right, etc., are crumbling. And it just showed that even this international system on which even the whole program of women, peace, and security is built on is rotten. And it's rotten
mhm,
because of business, because of using the energy of money to completely dissociate and disconnect people from their own humanity. And having a different type of, I want to say, allowing this to happen depending on the people that are concerned. And what you're saying is that this is the first time in Europe that white people are affected. And I think that's key. As long as the people that are dying in wars happen somewhere else, and that's what 9/11 did to the US, and that's what
America.
October 7 did to the Israel, is that suddenly it is in your home country. It's not something that you're doing to destroy somewhere else, that is not being streamed live, is not being, shown on your own TV. And what Gaza brought up to every single household is that this is what's happening and it's not a movie. You're not watching a
Yeah,
movie. I mean, it looks
definitely.
like a
Sadly, it's
movie,
not a,
but
no,
it's
it
not a movie.
doesn't.
And
Yeah.
the notion of helplessness and powerlessness is like, oh my God, this is not a movie and there's nothing I can do about it. Or is
Mhm.
there? And the question is like, is there is the key question. Because if my response is like, and I can't do anything about it, I will go further down into the notion of helplessness, powerlessness, and hopelessness. And that's the material of the isolation. I become more and more isolated, more and more fearful, more and more victimized. And there's no option other than either killing the other or killing myself, or killing the other before it kills me. And so this opening of the possibility of like, no, there is something to do about it. And there's a whole solidarity movement right now on sea going from around the world to break the siege on Gaza.
Mhm.
How is that perceived in Israel?
Well, it's not perceived well in Israel because of the government's reaction, and because I think the Israeli people and the Palestinian people right now are in such trauma and such pain, and I'm not comparing between pains, that is really something that is not being taken too much. It's not anything that the Israelis even talk about. They say once again, what's her name from Sweden has decided to what? Gita. What?
Her name is Greta.
Greta, sorry. Greta is coming again and wants more attention. That's about the attitude about it. And And, just like all the demonstrations in Israel, besides being effective in the sense that they are supportive of the families of the hostages, is not being affected until now. And today, I don't know if you are aware of what's happening in Jerusalem today. They have become a little more, I don't know what most probably we could use it more violent. I mean, they've become really angry, very, very angry.
Can you say more to those that don't know what's happening?
What is happening today or what's happening
Yeah.
in general? In
No,
general,
what's happening in general? There's a lot of, I mean, we hear about a
we
lot of
have the
movement.
demonstrations
Yeah.
maybe once, twice, three times a day. 400,000 Israelis were in the last demonstration in Tel Aviv, calling for the end of the war in Gaza, saying that if every military person in this country who has said that the idea of going into Gaza and starting another cycle of war is dangerous. People are going to die. The hostages are going to die. More people in Gaza are going to die. And we are not going to win the war. One of the things Israelis really, in my opinion, have to accept is that we lost the war on the 7th of October. And this is not a war we're going to win. And we have to understand the only way to win this war is to make peace. But we're not there. And people have really had enough of this government that has no respect for the people's voice, because between 60 and 80% of the Israelis wants the war to end and the hostages to return and to give the Palestinians whatever they ask for the hostages and to end the suffering of both people. And it's really, I had a conversation with a Palestinian friend, and she said, I feel so sad that it's not happening on the Palestinian side. No one demonstrates against the war. No one demonstrates against the leaders. No one dares to do what is so needed. And I must say that I understand the fear, because they live between the hammer and the partition Sadan. They have the Israelis oppressing them, and they have their own Palestinian governments oppressing them, and they can't afford to take the risk of demonstrating. But for her, it was really frustrating. She said, I look at your demonstrations and I am so jealous that the people of Israel go out to the streets and demonstrate against the war. The sad part of it is it's not effective. Until now, it's not been effective. On the other hand, they are blamed.
Why do you think that it's not effective? Like if there's like 70% of Israeli population that don't want this war and want the hostage back, and you have a huge movement like Higia Azman, it's time. That was say it's time to end the war, it's time to end the occupation, let's bring the hostage back, let's sign a peace agreement, and yet it's not effective. And there is election next year in Israel.
If there will be an election next year in
If there
Israel.
is, but it's interesting to think like Israel had become this fascist state when it was like proclaiming itself as the only democracy in the Middle East, and now it's kind of like the whole veil is like removed of all the programming and the manipulation. So how do you think how all this manifestation, all this I want to say even like lots of soldiers stepping out of the army and saying this is what's happening in Gaza, like you cannot ignore it anymore, because I feel like for a couple of years people of Israel have avalé, they had swollen the reality that the Israeli TV wanted to sell them, that this is a justified war. This is a war to bring the hostage back. And if we don't do that, then our security is at risk. And all of the propaganda that we grew up with. Yet now the veil is revealed and everybody knows what's the propaganda, the hasbara. And still, Bibi is still...
The government doesn't care.
Yeah, but
It's like they're
how
on
would you say?
drugs.
Like, if we have all this democratic mechanism, how come this government is still in place? It means that they still have some support to stay in place. Otherwise,
Yeah,
we...
they have they are still on the 6th of October. They think that they have the support that they had then, and they don't have that support, but they have the power to ignore it because they want to stay in power and they want to do what they think is the right. And they are destroying Israel. They are destroying what there is. It's horrific to see what is happening in Israel. No proper education. No, the health system is bad. The education system is bad. The army, we don't know how bad it is and how good it is. They just seem to continue their path and they don't care. I
Which is
cannot
interesting
understand
yeah.
how a member of parliament or government in this country wakes up in the morning, looks into the mirror, remembers what is happening to the hostages in Gaza. I don't expect them to be human and understand, care about what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, but to the people they neglected, they caused. It's really the Israeli government's fault that we reached the situation on the 7th of October. It would have not happened if they would have not been living in La La Land, believing that
I don't know if it's
they
La La
know
Land
what
or
is the arrogance.
the arrogance.
The arrogance for the second time in 50 years has failed us so badly. And they are not awakening.
When
They
is the
blame
first time?
everybody else except them. They don't take responsibility for any of it.
Yeah. I want to say a couple of things. One is like,
You know that Benjamin Netanyahu blamed Rabin for the 7th of October.
Yeah, yeah,
Can
I
you
heard that.
imagine?
I heard that, but
Wow.
also the fact that what many people also maybe don't realize is that many of the people that are currently in the government of Israel are the people that were that used to live in the settlement in Gaza that Sharon asked to take out.
Not many of them, few of them, but they
But they are the most
they're the voice of the people who
the voice of the
used to
people.
live there. Yes.
And
They
that
forget how many soldiers died because of those people. Why? I don't think that what Sharon did was very wise, because he should have negotiated peace and not just walked out. But the prices, they forget. One of the worst things that has happened to the Israeli public is that denial, which some people would say is very helpful and very supportive of the soul, because otherwise we are crazy, but we would become more crazy, really crazy, if we keep on remembering all the death and all the suffering. There's a place in Jerusalem, the tent of the remembrance.
yes.
And when I was there was like 23,400 soldiers who died, and empty walls for the next to come, ready with the platters without names. And I said, my God, that's like, wow. It's really difficult for Israelis, especially soldiers, especially men, to imagine peace, to imagine a change, to believe in it, to dream it, to think of it. They are so geared to war. They are so geared to that only solution. They were brought up. Israelis go to visit Dachau and the camps when they are 17. They go to the strip in Poland so that they will remember that this should never happen again, and they should get ready for the army service. That is why they take the Israeli kids there. My kids never went there. No way. That was like...
Nirit, you have such a wealth of remembrance, and in the face of denial, you bring in. I think that denial is a defense mechanism. Absolutely, it's a survival defense mechanism. And if we don't deny reality, we won't be especially when we don't like the reality. We need to deny it so that we can continue living in our fantasy world, and the fantasy world where we perceive ourselves different, better, living in harmony, in peace, etc. And at the same time facing reality and still believing in peace, especially right now, can be perceived as a fantasy, La La Land. So as a closure, to close this discussion,
I just have to say something about that and the Nakba.
Yes, that's what I was saying. So tell us, you that lived through it, tell us.
No, I did not live through the Nakba. I was born in... but knowing Palestinians, Israeli Palestinians, 48 Palestinians and Palestinians who live in Palestine, the most interesting thing, the parallel between the survivors of the Holocaust and the survivor of the Nakba, is that they both in Israel chose to deny their history in order to survive and recreate their lives. And on the other side of the border, where the refugees lived, they grew up on the stories of the Nakba. Their grandmothers had the key of their house, and every moment that she had, she would repeat the story of her Nakba over and over again. And it's really interesting to see the difference, and the difference on how affected it is. And also another thing that no one takes care of, and that is the anger between the refugees of Palestine and the 48 Palestinians in Israel. They, so many people say the Israeli Palestinians can be a bridge for peace. And I say, there is an elephant there in the room.
Absolutely.
And you should really take care of it before they become a bridge. They have to talk about their history and their shared history and their pain, and maybe afterwards they can become a bridge. So even that is, it's like smothering or smoothing or trying to create what isn't there.
Absolutely.
Really not.
Absolutely. And I think that I often say, like, what do you do on a bridge? You walk on a bridge. Like, even if it brings you to the other side of the shore, you still have to walk on its back. And how will we walk on the back of Palestinian inside Israel? Like, even the denomination, you had Palestinian 1948, Palestinian citizen of Israel, Palestinian Israeli, just Palestinian, like the identity crisis that we have within Palestine. And what do you refer to Palestine? As I said, the discussion that I had with this Israeli friend around what does it actually mean to be Palestinian, and the nation and the culture and the variety of experience of the Palestinian people. And I think in a way, it is the challenge for any of us, not just Palestinian, but also Israeli, also Jewish. Like, what defines us, our identity, when it is not threatened by the other?
Absolutely.
And I have an identity that is legitimate, just as a human being, without putting myself in the different boxes and different hats that I can have, but that are not denying the existence of the other. And I think ultimately, this is really at the heart of the belief that peace is possible. Peace is possible because we are able to come to this heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is we have one shared humanity.
Connecting is the key to peace. Connecting, and connecting in a very deep way, the same way as a child connects to its parents, being able to trust one another in such a deep way. And as we grew up in very judgmental homes, some of us, and patriarchalic homes, you didn't, by the way. I heard the podcast about how you grew up. That is amazing story. But most children grew up in a place where they had to trust their parents, who were sometimes violent, sometimes verbally violent, sometimes, parents who say to their children, if they call their children and the children don't come, they say, okay, bye, I'm going, you can stay. And that's how they can create the worst trauma in a kid that has to trust them. And he has just lost trust. And he will build a wall, and he will find a way of surviving because he depends on these people who he can't trust because they've just failed him. It's the same with it's the key to the story.
The key to the story, connection. I 100% agree. Nirit, thank you. תודה. Thank you for your heart, for your wisdom, for all that you bring.
Thank you for your heart and wisdom and work that you're doing, which is so creative and brings hope.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for holding space with us. If this episode moved you, please support the Peace is Possible podcast by subscribing, sharing it with friends, or posting it online. Every ripple counts. We'll be back next month with another conversation that dives deep into what it truly means to activate peace within and around us. To support the vision behind Peace Activation, visit peaceactivation.org and follow along on social media. You'll find both Peace Activation and me, Eva Dalak, across all platforms. Until next time, may you meet yourself and others with peace.